Perfect. So, hi all. Thank you for joining. This is AI Gateway Working Group weekly community call. Today we are February 12th. So, just a reminder before we start, this is a CNCF project. So, please um, be kind, be nice to each other, and also keep in mind that this is recorded. So, if you're not nice, we'll watch you on in YouTube. So, yeah, and if you missed any of the meetings and you want to watch it, so at the beginning of the meeting notes, there is a link to the recording. So this is just like a general piece of information. With that said, we can get started. So as in any other meeting, we will start with reviewing if there is any action item from the last week. Let's see. Okay, so we had here two items. One of them was to ping all the leads of the working group and make sure that we are aligned on pushing prototypes to main. So I think we are aligned. Morgan, Keith, I saw your comments. Yeah, I have no problem with what you're suggesting. Just didn't have time to update the PR. I'll update it either later today or tomorrow, and we can merge it. Just to explain more for all of you who joined today for the first time. So usually working groups, by definition, we do not own code. So all the code that is pushed in this repo is serving for POC, prototypes, and these kinds of things for experimentation, collaboration between contributors, and these things. Eventually, we will need to make the proposals mature and move them to Gateway API or any other appropriate place to get the capabilities that we develop. So this is one point. The second point, so I'm not sure who is using Kubernetes Calendar, but we still have this issue of duplicate entries. I've tried to ping SIG contributor experience, no response yet. But I'm on it, so hopefully we'll get that fixed. So with that said, we can start the agenda of this week of this meeting. So first, I'd like to congratulate Morgan. Morgan is joining us as a lead of this working group. Morgan will be replacing Shane, who is stepping out, but he will still be involved, just not as a lead. So congratulations, Morgan. Well deserved.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, you guys are great.
yeah, great work.
S- Before we move on from the prototypes and go into our demo, I ported over the existing prototype to fit the new model and built it. Can I show it?
Sure, sure. And
Yeah.
you need to be co-host to share screen. So let me make you co-host.
Okie dokie.
And then I can already make Jamie co-host because you're going to present as well.
We'll see. We'll see how this works.
Yeah, go for it.
I was just excited about setting up Keith's prototype. Can everybody see? Is it big enough?
Wait, not yet.
No?
I can see it.
Okay,
Yeah, I can see it.
perfect.
Okay,
So
now
we
I can see it.
we have a pull request out from Keith with a backend prototype, which is awesome. I have it running, by the way, so we have it all set up. There's a few changes that I think you'll have to make to the PR for this to work for everybody else, but check it out. Let me put HTTP. Oh, is it not going to work now that I'm here doing this?
Well, I see your
Morgan,
photo.
I thought by now you should be familiar with live demos, that it never works.
Oh no! Oh no! We have it syncing and it does work. I probably need to forward a port or something. everything. I think that's almost certainly the problem. I think I need to forward a port. Let me do that real quick if I can. I have the demo commands here. Boom. Let's see if that's the problem.
Is this a demo script that I can run myself?
Yeah, well, so I set up Keith's backend prototype, and then I applied the manifest, the sample manifest that he has.
Yeah, I mean, like if like people want
There it
to
goes.
come to our repo and run this flow to make sure that it works for them, yeah, maybe we can push it.
Yeah, I can update if we'd like with Keith has some scripts, but I can put an end-to-end script. But if we take a look here, I'll clear out now that it's port forwarding. This is using Keith's backend to represent HTTP bin as a service, and it's pretty cool. So we can represent a backend now in an egress proxy, just like we wanted to do. I won't go into further depth than that, just for the sake of time. But I recommend everybody check it out. It's a good starting place. What we were discussing in terms of building on this prototype. So we have this prototypes folder, and what we want to do is the prototypes folder is a module. That way we can work together and share code. Anything that's supposed to be shared can be shared in internal. So right now we have backend and internal, so we can build off of that shared backend kind that Keith added. And then, for example, if we want to change the control plane, I separated out. I don't know if you want to do this, Keith, but we have the backend control plane here. And then if we look inside of the backend control plane, it's just importing. It's importing from internal. Anyways, simple stuff. It's all up on the discussion that's in our pull request for the change to the README. But yes, it's working. This is what it will look like. And if you want to add new prototypes, you just put them in here as it describes in the README discussion.
Yeah, this is very exciting. So I must say that since we started this working group, we had these two main proposals that we were driving, and as we continue, the proposals are getting, we get more proposals, but the two main proposals were the egress scenario and then the payload processing. So it's very exciting to see that we have things working. Great work, guys. I mean, this is awesome. Thank you so much for driving this, Keith and Morgan. This is amazing. Yeah. So I'll give it a moment if anyone wants to ask questions on this before we move to model as a service. Yeah, so I'll be quiet for a moment. Any questions on this demo?
Can
Yeah,
we see what
first
the
off-
gateway? Oh, sorry.
So go ahead.
I just want to see what the actual like gateway CRD or whatever looks like for an egress.
Yes. So we can grab that. I'll just show you via the pull request. That will be a little easier, unless you would like to, Keith. Since
No,
it's kind
please
of
go ahead. No, please go ahead.
okay, absolutely. Let me just navigate to it again. Unless I already have it open. Let's see here. Well, all right. Let me share my screen again. I'll just do it from the terminal. That's easier. I just have to blow it up really big, which can be a little bit of a bummer. Am I already in prototypes? Yes. Control plane, config, samples. Yeah, let's look at setting up HTTP bin. Keith, do you want to walk through this?
Oh, sure. So this HTTP bin sort of sample code is just one of Istio samples that we use for tests and demos and things like that. So it's a deployment, a service, and a service account for running HTTP bin. I don't think we actually end up using this in what you just showed, Morgan, because if you go to gateway, yeah, here we go.
Right
Put this
here, what you wanted.
Yes. So right here, we create a gateway. Instead of talking to the local HTTP bin, we actually go to at FQDN's httpbin.org, which is a hosted HTTP bin that anybody on the internet can access. I haven't tested this part out yet, but one thing that might be interesting to do would be to have an HTTP route, do traffic splitting between the external HTTP bin backend and the local HTTP bin service, and see and make sure you get proper traffic splitting between those. Because thinking about the AI use case, that's sort of that's sort of a facsimile or an example of one of the scenarios you want to be able to enable, where you're doing local model serving with a route and splitting between maybe local serving and remote serving. But yeah, this is what it generally looks like. You got a destination of type FQDN, you specify the host name, and then you've got the ports that are specified. You can also do, again, have done very little testing of it. Thankful that Morgan showed the happy path in the demo. But you can add things like TLS in the backend as well. So if you wanted to you've got port 80 here, but you could also add port 443 to do HTTPS as a protocol with TLS. So yeah, that's what it looks like. Any specific questions you had there, Jamie? I think it was.
No, I mostly just wanted to understand like what the change was, if it was a change to the actual gateway API, but this looks like a new is X backend destination rule. I guess this is X backend destination. I was thinking that was the same thing as destination rule, but that's a totally different thing.
Yeah, different. So here it is in the actual implementation. I was thinking about showing off the TLS stuff, but that's probably a little bit much. But the interesting thing we can do with this is you can use it to represent a single external FUTN. You could imagine that being an inference endpoint. Then you can start applying policy. You can start adding filter rules, and then eventually we want to be able to make it easy to add things that do payload processing and just hang it off of that back end.
One other thing I'll mention that might be good to keep in mind is that one of the things that this proposal does not cover, and the prototype from the proposal does not cover, is how you get traffic to the gateway. So in Morgan's demo, she just did a curl request against the gateway's IP address via port forwarding essentially, and that's a good way to show how the egress process can work. In a typical Kubernetes application, the way you might do that would be via like a HTTP proxy environment variable that your programming language or framework knows how to read, or some other in code configuration where you manually replace the host name of your inference endpoint or of HTTP bin, you replace it with the gateway's IP address instead. This automatic egress redirection is typically a feature of service meshes, and we didn't want to recreate that that specific interaction or try to be too prescriptive here, because there's just really not a lot out there actually about that automatic egress gateway redirection, and I don't know how feasible it would be to try to create something like that. So just wanted to call that out.
Yes, and I'll close this down instead of opening up that can of worms. But if you look at our proposal, I was trying to slowly get to it. We do call that out as something that we haven't answered yet, and we can leave up to folks. How do you enforce that all traffic goes through the gateway? Anything else? Yes, I just showed the happy path, but I'm happy that there's a happy path. Are we ready to go to the model as a service, folks?
Yeah, I think if there are no questions on this topic, Jamie, you can take it.
All right. Let me present my screen. Hopefully this works. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So today my plan is to talk about models as a service as we have currently / some future stuff implemented it at Red Hat. I apologize. These slides I had to throw together in like the last 20 minutes. I haven't had a little bit more time this week to do this, but it's been a busy week. So, but this should hopefully give a high level idea of like what we are doing, and then I'm going to try to leave a decent amount of time at the end because I'm very curious as to how to take what we're doing and match it to what y'all would be looking for, and maybe like transpose it. Because I think based on my talks with Nir, there's certain things that we're doing that you probably won't want. But let's just get into it. So to start off with, this is like our high level architecture of how models as a service works. So we have our user, and the first thing that they need to do is mint a key. So they go through this flow. They go through the mass default gateway. This is the name of our gateway. And then we use, in the backend, we use Quadrant, and specifically Authorino, to do authorization. So they'll run through Authorino, we'll authorize it's them. Currently, we're just authorizing against an OpenShift token or Kubernetes token for that particular user. If they are who they say they are, they'll hit this little mass API endpoint here, this component that we've created, which will mint a key for them. Right now, the key that it's minting is a service account token, but we're gonna change how that is in the future to have our own little minting system. That's a little bit more robust than that. It'll return that token, and then that user will feed that same token back in for their inference flow. So same gateway, obviously different path, so different HTTP route. And then that will have an auth policy associated with it and a rate limit policy associated with it that it has to pass to go into the inference service. And that'll return some information back to the user. So that's the high level. I assume that you guys don't care so much about the minting flow because I don't know that that's a thing that you guys are interested in. So I'm just going to focus on the inference piece. So this is once you have your service account token, in the future, a different type of token. Client makes a call to the API gateway. Quadrant applies the policies, and I'll talk a little bit about how that works in just a minute. Authorino validates the service account token. It doesn't say it here. It also adds some metadata that it then passes to validates it. It's successful. It adds some metadata that it passes to Limitador that then it uses to validate that they're within whatever the limits that you set for them are. If it's true or if they are within those limits, it'll update them based on the response from the token. So right now, this is only going to work with, I think, OpenAI compatible APIs that include token information. I think we're going to try to expand that in the future. But we take the response and we take that token information, add it to whatever your rate limit is. That's how we keep up with these rate limits. And then we, if that passes, then we allow. If it fails, then we throw back a 429. So that's the basic inference flow. Just to kind of talk about Quadrant, Authorino, and Limitador, because those are sort of the core engines for how all this stuff works. The way that works is with these policy controllers. So you could create a policy controller that attaches to the gateway, and that will forward the request to a pod that does different things with it for a policy controller at a high level. Specifically, there's a WASM plugin that gets put into the gateway that pushes to Authorino and Limitador, which are two pods that live on the cluster, and does the validation pieces that I had mentioned before. And then, passes that information back, either turns back a 403 if they're not authenticated, or a 429 if they're out of they're out of their limit, out of their current rate limit, or it just lets it pass through to from Quadrant's standpoint, whatever the back end is, they don't care. We're just using it specifically for models. To get kind of an idea of what the backing resources are, and some of this is some new stuff that we're designing right now. So we're designing a little piece that we're going to put in front of the Quadrant stuff to kind of make it a little easier for our users to understand that it's mass specific things. So we have this idea of a mass model. This mass model will have a model reference. So you're going to refer to an existing model. Right now, we only support LLM inference services that live on the cluster. We're still pretty early days with all of this stuff. But we, based on a lot of pushes, or probably want to support external services or external models pretty soon, which is why it's so great to hear all the great work that's being done with the external endpoint piece. We'll definitely be using that. But right now we only support this model ref. But the nice thing is we've designed it in a way where you have a kind. And so when we move to external models, we'll be able to swap out what these values are. So you could just change it to kind external model, and you'll probably have like a host name and maybe some sort of information about where the secret that you need to connect to the model is stored, all that sort of stuff. We haven't really thought about it too much, but we're trying to make it flexible enough to work. But this will be our model reference. And then we have a mass auth policy, and that's our version of this, which will point to the model ref, and it'll have some group information. This group will be something that will be baked into the token that we're reading. Right now, it's just groups based on the service account living inside of the cluster. But eventually, it'll be something that'll just be baked into the token that we can use. And then the backing thing for the mass policy, mass auth policy, is just the Quadrant auth policy, which you can see here. It's the same information we use the model / the mass auth policy to kind of create this piece. But the auth policies from Quadrant are obviously a little bit more complex, and they have a set of authentication rules and authorization rules. And this response piece is just stuff that you can augment the response that goes to limited door with, so that you can capture certain data. So in this case, we're capturing our username, which is something that we can store and then send off for us to Prometheus, which is our database that we use for capturing metrics, and then we can display it with Grafana or whatever. So this is the authorization portion of it. And then behind that, we have this is the authorization authentication portion of it. Behind that, we have the limiting portion of it, which for us, we're going to call the mass subscription model. And so the subscription, again, contains links to the models, and then it contains token rate limits. So a rate limit over a certain period of time. Right now, this is what we can do with Auth-Reno as it currently stands, or sorry, limited door as it currently stands, is we can give it a limit over a certain window of time. We're going to look into expanding that out as we move forward. But I could say, like, you have 100 tokens over 1 minute. As I mentioned, well, then we have owners, and owners are kind of the same idea, where you have to be a part of this group in order to use the subscription. So I, the user, need to have both a policy that lets me have access to the model and a subscription that lets me have access to the model in order to get all the way to the model. And real quick, taking a look at what's backing that, it's just a token rate limit policy, and kind of similar story to the auth policy. You can see that it's using model information from before, but it's the same dealio here, just a little bit more complex than what we've got. We've kind of simplified it for the users for the high level piece. And just as to know that the limitations for how this works, again, we're reading the token information that's being sent back to us from the response. So currently, a user can go over their token limit. And we've tried to figure out exactly how we want to handle this. Like, if I have 100 tokens, I could say, read me back or print me the entire book of War and Peace. And if it let me do that, then it would let me do that, because I'm allowed to go over my token limit. Once I'm over my token limit, then I'll start getting 429s. But there's probably at some point we need to work on a way to prevent you from being able to like request something that's just like some massive number of tokens and let you go way over your token limit. But that's just want to point out that that limiting piece. And I really like that's kind of all there is to it. I can do a little bit of a demo here for how it works. Close my terminal.
Jamie, maybe a question before the demo.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think Keith is still here, unless he already he just dropped. So I think the main interesting part here is the APIs.
The APIs.
So
okay.
Yeah, so as a Kubernetes working group, we are trying to standardize APIs. So it feels to me, Mike, maybe you can also chime in to give us the view of what you think from Microsoft. So I think that ideally, if we can standardize like a set of CRDs, a set of APIs that help us with defining users and what are they allowed to use, which models, and rate limiting, and these kinds of stuff, where the backing can be, for example, in Red Hat, it could be quadrant-based and Authorino and all these things. But in Microsoft, it could be a different gateway and different backend. But then if we get like standard APIs, that moves us I think in the right direction, because if we push it as a standard, then all the gateways in the community, they will want to implement this standard. Yeah, I'll stop here. I see Morgan, you raised your hand.
It's related to what you're saying and to what Jamie said about being able to go over your token limit. If it were a streaming request, you could still interrupt it while it's while it's sitting back. So where in your API currently do you denote whether something is a streaming request or not, or have you not implemented that yet?
By the way, it's not only streaming. You can limit the maximum output tokens.
Yeah, right? That's true. If you look at the
Yeah, it's just, I think that is not what a user would expect when they send a request. So they do expect to get a response, or either a response or an error. So it's not like, oh man, you got like 2 tokens left. So you got, hey, Adam, I don't know. And then everything stopped, but it's a successful response. So that is not an expected UX, I think.
And specifically for the streaming portion, like the thing that we're reading is it reports back its token usage. So like we are not calculating the token usage on the fly. So like we still need it to report the whole thing back, so that then we can read the body and say, oh, this is the token usage. And it works with streaming and not streaming. We don't, I don't know exactly how the code in the back end works, but like we don't have to denote it from our side. It just works with both, as far as I know. Not as far as I know. It just works with both. I don't know why I qualified that.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know what the answer to that part would be. And again, like I also don't know that, like we haven't validated it with every different type of model either. So
it would be good for us it's a good use case for us to think through. For example, what you said here, you could imagine if you can notice in a body processor, you can notice whether or not it's streaming, and you can also see the token limit, and you also know the rate limit. So you could say it's a batch request, and I see that the max tokens allowed is higher than than some other limit. But I think that's good as a user story, but not something we can address right now.
Yeah. That's something to keep in mind. But I think in general, we would like to, to see the broader picture. So sorry to interrupt. Just I thought Keith is still here, and I was like really interested to get his thoughts. But yeah, Jamie, unless there are more questions, anyway, feel free anyone to raise. Yeah.
So for you, so you're like, we want to standardize the APIs. So we're talking like
Mhm.
a standardized CRD that everyone uses,
Yeah,
but then backs in a different way.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like the one that you're just showing on your screen. So instead of doing it as mass specific, it should be like networking, Kubernetes.io, and then it should be like model and not mass model or something like that. Or inference model, or I don't know if we want to limit it to inference model or generalize it, not sure yet, but the idea is to generalize the rate limiting part, right? I think this is very important one. And of course, if we generalize rate limiting, we should probably also generalize the access control of which user or group has access to which model, something along these lines.
This is where
Yeah, I
Mike and I
see.
start laughing because user auth and gateway API is proving so very, very complex. But I'm sorry, Shiga, you have your hand up.
Oh yeah, so I just agree that it will be quite useful for like have a universal standard for such like a token rate limiting, because it's like a common use case for all like inference workloads. If we can have some like a universal standard probably in like a gateway API or something, so maybe Microsoft can have their own token rate limit policy implementation. Google can also have their own token rate limit implementation. So instead of like a kind of bind to quadrant or something, it will be quite useful to have some universal standard so that everyone can have their own implementations.
Yeah, rate limiting definitely should go to gateway API eventually, like at the end. We are here, because we want to develop this prototype of model as a service and rate limiting, and we want to make sure all the stakeholders in this working group, they all agree about the structure, the fields, the spec of the CRD, that we are all aligned, and to agree that this is useful for all the organizations like Google, Red Hat, Microsoft, everyone, whoever is participating here, they all have an opinion. We want to make sure that this is aligned with everyone, and then we can push it, upstream to Gateway API and make sure that all organizations can reuse the same structs. So this is like the end goal. Does it make sense, Jamie?
Yeah, it makes sense. If we're going to do rate limiting, or if we're going to do a push back up to the gateway API too, I would assume that it'd have to be more generic than just models. Like we'd want to be able to rate limit on specific paths and that sort of thing. So
There's some of this is going to be interesting because on the one hand, I agree that pushing it out to gateway API is the right answer. And I also would point out that that's biting off a fair amount of complexity as well. So I think it's the right answer. I just don't want anybody to underestimate the amount of work that isn't going to end up being. It's okay, Mike and Keith and I are happy to help with that work, but yeah.
Definitely interested in it. It's something that is like a core capability and of most like east-west traffic like meshes and stuff like that is having kind of rate limiting all support for north-south and for these workloads too. And yeah, like some of the things off the top of my head is like, yes, definitely limiting and configuring it separately, like by path or something like that. Having some ability to configure like the granularity of like, are you rate limiting based on a API key passing to the header or based on an IP address. Like some of those things are like different, and that'll be some interesting nuance to figure out. And then yeah, probably having ideally some kind of generic enough approach that you can use the same structure for request-based rate limiting for like the combination EP case versus token-based rate limiting, and share some of the parts that they still have in common.
So maybe I'd like to have like an action item. So Jamie, definitely for you, but I think Mike and Keith and Flynn also, you guys are very relevant here. So an action item, I would like to see if that's okay with you. Of course, no pressure. But if that's okay with you guys, I would like to see like a request, a proposal, sorry, with requirements, and then we can iterate on the requirements and make sure that this rate limiting that we are just discussing, we add all the requirements from all the stakeholders and make sure that we can meet the requirements and make sure the design that we do and we try to push meets all the requirements, or at least most of them. Is it okay?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at Keith's comment there. Yeah, Keith, you joined
Keith is
just in
back.
time. You can take the action item and it'll be great, right? Right?
No,
Yeah.
y'all did such a
Oh,
great job
that's
without
fun.
me. Please continue.
No, just
I
base it
think
on the
we'd,
presentation.
I think we'd gotten just as far as saying, "Oh yeah, rate limiting. That sounds cool." Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually stopping Jamie exactly at the beginning of the demo. So Jamie, maybe you want to continue and walk us through your demo?
Sure. Yeah. Can you guys still see my screen? I think so, but
No.
I cannot.
okay.
Also, welcome back, Keith.
Yeah, the demo is not supremely interesting. So we're going to get our host information here. We'll get our token. So this is the part that we probably don't care so much about, but this does our token minting and mints a token for us. And then we utilize that token to list what models we have available to us. In this case, it's just this one living internal. We'll send a response and it will give us a response back. This is a simulator one, so I don't have to use up GPUs. We'll send a response back where we don't include our token information, and we'll get a 401 on authorize. And then we'll send a list of 16 responses. And at some point, we move from 200s to 429s. So yeah. And yeah, it's something I didn't mention early on is this is for us, we got the, I guess the advantage of kind of knowing what we wanted. So we are rate limiting based on user. So we don't have to think about wanting to rate limit based on like too many things. We've kind of made that decision. But I do know, like someone mentioned, that like that's probably something that we would need to make flexible enough where you could rate limit based on whatever. So
are you actually rate limiting based on a user, or are you rate limiting based on the bearer token?
Based on the user information. It's like based on user plus like subscription they're a part of.
So the reason that I'm asking that question is that there is no user in your curl command there.
Right. So
at least not
yes,
in any obvious way.
It's based on the token, but we're getting user information from the token.
Okay.
Yeah. But like in this particular instance, if this user went and created a secondary token and then tried to do a bunch of requests, they would still get 429s because of the same user. Yeah.
The point that came up in chat there is, yeah, your rate limiting is much more common north-south than it is east-west right now. There's only one east-west implementation I know of that really does it. In the north-south world, it tends to be very configurable exactly how you construct the key that you use to determine what rate is allowed. And it's somewhere between extremely flexible and excessively flexible, depending on who you talk to. But it tends to be one of the nastier parts of trying to design a rate limiting solution, because invariably you come up and you go, oh, this is great. We'll take the user and we'll hand over this particular thing. And then the moment you do that, the second person you talk to says, oh, but we rate limit based on the combination of user and IP address. And then somebody else says, oh, we do it based on the user and the phase of the moon. And, it just goes off the deep end. So it's a very difficult problem to do that. That being said, particularly for my partners in crime, or at least partners in Gateway API, for the love of all that is holy, please, 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 let's not try to tackle the entire world all at once. Maybe we can limit it to HTTP headers or something like that. There's got to be, I'm sure we can put some smaller box around it for the, the initial implementation.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, Keith, do not even say the word cell and rate limiting in the same sentence. I just don't do it.
Yeah, ironically, the rate limiting is technically done off of HTTP headers here because when it goes through the authorization piece, we put the user
Right.
information in the header, and then the secondary piece reads the header information.
Which is pretty typical, actually. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of cases where you have something that you figured out a way to trust to modify the headers, and then you put the interesting stuff into that, and off you go.
Yeah, my comments in chat are pure trolling. I think headers is absolutely the right gun clarity, especially to start off with.
It's at least a reasonable place to start. Yeah.
For
Headers
sure.
and an IP address.
I mean, like, yeah, headers and five tuple.
At least in Gateway API.
Yeah, Gateway API seems reasonable.
Yeah. The source IP address is actually a pretty interesting one because it falls apart in the east-west case in almost every instance.
And also falls
But at the
apart
same
if you have
time, it's often
multiple
not
hops of
something.
north-south.
Sorry, what was that, Mike?
Oh, also if you have like multiple hops of north-south, if you're
Oh,
sort of
you don't
VPN,
like
yeah.
exported for and things like that? You don't love the idea of wrapping everything in the proxy protocol? Less facetiously, I don't know of any north-south implementations that promote the source IP into a pseudo header, but I wonder if somebody does it. I don't know. It's a thing to look at because, yeah, sometimes that is that definitely comes up in practice. And yes, Shahar, we are. The problem is that there are so many things we can mention that are badly designed.
Yeah. Anyway, you mentioned Flynn, and I completely agree that we should start simple. I think this is more generally, this is like the way we would like to tackle proposals here and push prototypes. You would like start simple, do something that works, like a simple use case. So HTTP only at the beginning. We don't try to boil the ocean, just try to prove the concept. Then we can think about it more and see if we can generalize, how we can generalize. Yeah, so we should focus initially in HTTP.
Keith, if only you knew somebody at Gateway API to talk to about metals. This is kind of a dumb question, but all the stuff that I know of in the AI world right now is based on HTTP. Are there places in the ecosystem that I have just not run across yet that use gRPC instead? Anybody?
I'll let there's a hand go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I think currently both like VUN and SGLang support gRPC. I know at least for Gateway API inference extension, we are like exploring to add gRPC support for inference workloads.
Cool. Keith.
Yeah, even outside of just the sort of inference workloads in the serving use case, there's also I saw some stuff coming out of Google about Google and Anthropic around doing MCP over the gRPC transport as a separate sort of transcoding option instead of JSON RPC. So I'm wondering if that's going to become more common. It's just rank speculation at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see, as AI things continue to get more and more pervasive, people like the network engineers revolting and saying, please do something we already know how to work with for this advanced stuff.
It's kind of interesting because on the one hand, I agree with that sentiment, and on the other hand, it introduces all of the delights of protobuf over JSON instead of JSON and things like that, right? But Yeah, it's an interesting thing to look at. But that leaves me basically agreeing with, I believe it was Near who was saying, yeah, let's just start thinking about HTTP.
Yeah. So I know that if we take VLLM, for example, so they do support gRPC for inference, but if we look on HTTP, I think all the model servers today, they support HTTP. So
Yeah.
considering the fact that we are a working group that is AI dedicated, so this is AI Gateway Working Group, I think we should focus initially on HTTP because this would give us, a way to connect with all the model servers in the backend, like VLLM, SGLang, whatever we want to use. So HTTP is the first candidate to show the concept. Okay, so I think the next step in this direction, in this proposal, would be like to collect requirements, make sure we are aligned on that. And then, Jamie, I think it would be great if you have the capacity like to drive, the first prototype, and it could, like, you could reuse whatever you already have. So the set of definitions, and then we can see how to generalize those. Does it make sense?
Sure. Do people have strong feelings on the name? I feel like there's already a lot of pushback on that.
Oh, no worries. We can.
It's a prototype. Name it whatever
Yeah,
you
it's a
want.
prototype.
Just, or maybe a different way to put that is absolutely. People have very strong feelings about names. Therefore, you should just pick one and ignore all the strong feelings until you have something that's worth getting to a consensus for the name.
I'll also say that in this group, one of the big goals here is like to not seek perfection initially. So we're explicitly, in my mind, I have a spirit of try not to block an initial PR or any PR on something like naming.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be an impediment to experimentation and success.
Yeah, we want to iterate quickly, as quickly as we can. So pick your favorite name. We can go with that.
If you're doing the prototype, you get to pick your favorite name.
Yeah, that's how it works. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jamie, for this demo and great capabilities that you showed us. So we have a few more minutes.
Keith's hand was up.
Your hand. Yeah, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, sorry, this was just one last question for me. But I didn't know if you got to this while I was gone, so apologies if this is duplicate. Happy to follow up offline. But one of the issues I opened up that I think kicked off this whole demo discussion was around sort of the model as a service calling and that use case and how backend might need to have LLM calling as maybe it's a protocol. What kind of telemetry and signaling do we need to have to the proxies to have like special LLM, like OpenAI API style or Anthropic API style sort of helpers or context? Did we get into any of that in the demo? Are there any requirements that we should add to that work stream?
I don't think so.
It's really fascinating, Keith, to think about that and think about the extent to which it will certainly not produce weird bugs between implementations, things like that.
Yeah, do we want to broach or mention protocol translation?
No, we do not.
I didn't think. Yes, there's a line I've been sitting trying to think of as we were discussing it. We're trying to talk about supporting payload processing, which encompasses all of these things we're trying to do, including to this. But also, we want to have suggestions about certain things that we feel should always exist across implementations. And so in that regard, it could be worth mentioning at least that protocol translation could be desirable.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like protocol translation, enriched telemetry. Um, we're already seeing this in a lot of specific implementations. Um, you know, model rewriting is another one that comes to mind. Uh, there are some APIs out there. I was planning on starting there, but if folks have use cases that they want to add, I'd be happy to have it in the issue. Um, Honestly, I'm not 100% sure how much this is a good fit for Gateway API at this point, just because it is so wide open. But I'll start there at least and see what
There's
proving it looks like.
Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff buried in there. I actually have to go back and reread a bunch of the backend stuff.
Yes.
Sorry, Near.
Yeah. So Keith, just a word about like you mentioned, I think a long list like model rewrite and telemetry and other things. Like, in your view, do you think it all belongs to a single proposal, or should we like tackle each individual issue while in the back of our mind maintain this composability and just to do like separation of concerns and build it step by step. I think it makes sense to me. Like, rate limit is a great addition and is missing and is extremely useful in AI gateway use cases. So I would like to see rate limiting make progress. And on the same time, I completely agree with you about the other use cases like model rewrite that should allow traffic splitting and versioning of models behind the scenes without requiring from the user to redeploy models and these things. But I do think that this is like could be potentially developed separately while we keep things aligned and make use of this community call to make sure it is all aligned.
100%. And I completely agree with what you're saying, what Mike's saying in the chat as well, where I think the way to sort of walk this line is to design with expansion in mind. I think one of the early questions I have about rate limiting is, if this is a policy, is this a filter? Is this payload processing? Where does that live? There are other
We're just gonna
things.
have to fix policies. That's just all there is
Yes.
to it.
There's at least 3 user stories here. Yes. The answer
Yeah.
is yes.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different options for where that could live, and then for some of the other stuff I'm talking about, like model rewriting, maybe that's a policy, maybe that's a property, maybe that's a part of what we want to call the LLM protocol. The same way we've got an MCP protocol. I've seen different options out there in the wild. There's also Morgan and I talked about this last week a little bit briefly, but the idea of in the same way that we've got inference extension being able to look at sort of GPU metrics and things like that, can we also have a way to get capacity from an LLM provider to be able to modify how we shift traffic? Like I think my first step is just to collect all of these and to sort of say these are the personas, these are the use cases, these are the people in the organization who are going to want to be accomplishing each one of these tasks, and then figuring out, okay, what makes sense where do we think these should live, maybe in a resource, and do a lot of that design, not a lot of it, but some early design thought process about these use cases, and then prototype them out sort of one by one as it makes sense.
Yeah. So just to make my point, so I completely agree, and I think that you should create an issue and mention the list of all the items that you have in mind. All of them are important, and maybe like if you list it and make an issue, maybe someone from any of the organizations will chime in and say, hey, I got the, I don't know, model rewrite implementation, I can present and push it upstream. Same as Jamie has here, rate limiting implementation, and his team has already a background, and so we can, build it step by step, like make it building blocks. Yeah, Flynn, you wanted to say something.
One of the things that certainly goes along with trying to not boil the ocean and is probably worth bearing in mind as we think over some of this stuff is the ease with which we could design stuff that ends up being prohibitively expensive to implement. We can design anything we want, but it kind of doesn't accomplish anything unless people are willing to implement it and use it. We have certainly seen a couple of times in Gateway API where somebody will come up with something and go, wow, this would be great. And all the implementers go, that would be great, but only if you're going to write the code because, you just picked something that's insanely difficult. So, I kind of find myself thinking about like model rewriting and going, how much do we want to tell people implementing things that they have to do here? And ultimately that gets down to let's not try to boil the ocean at once, but also it gets down to let's be judicious and intentional about collecting the use cases and figuring out the roles and personas and trying to go through and grab the ones that really benefit people that we care about as opposed to the ones that will be used by, one dude in one case over a decade, that sort of thing. So I really like the idea of going off, and I particularly like the idea of letting Keith go off and do the use case selection or collection. So thanks, Keith. Appreciate that. And I think Morgan, you had your hand up. Were you responding to me, or were you going to point out that we're over time?
No, well, we are over time. Whoops. I just had a quick thought. So you all have been in this business longer than I have. At least I assume most of you have. Trying to select use cases that we want to call out in specific. Token rate limiting seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Why is it a no-brainer versus other things? Do we have a framework in mind where we can figure out? In my mind, what it seems like is when we imagine people doing implementations based on this spec, what's something that all of them are going to implement across the board? If we can just figure out those stories, that's the stuff we should probably call out so that we don't have undefined behavior or divergent behavior. And so, that's our North Star. And so maybe as we
there is a subtlety there to add, which is that we probably want to start by defining the people that we expect, the roles, the personas that we expect to be doing the work or finding utility in what we're doing.
So yeah,
for our I kind of feel like, it's more likely that the stuff we're doing is going to be directly applicable to somebody who is trying to run a platform where they are making things available to end users who will be writing applications, but it might not be the developers writing the applications who get the most benefit out of this, right? So, there are hairs like that to be split that, there's been some thought on that front, but other than that, I completely agree with, you start with the ones that are going to be of benefit to the greatest number of people in the greatest number of situations.
Yeah, I don't know. You're right. We got to pick our user. My hunch here is that our user the user we should target is the one that's operating a platform and not writing, the application necessarily.
That I have not talked to anybody else in this call about that. So take that as an opinion of mine that could easily be wrong.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, it's something to discuss, and I'll try to remember to call it out if I don't see it in the proposal that we should use that as a North Star. Yeah.
Okay. So just to summarize, we do have a few action items. So Keith, you are the action item driver today. You're going to have a lot of action items for you. This is for the 10 minutes that you went. So thank you everyone for joining today. That
Thank
was a
you.
great
Sorry I was
call.
late.
Yeah. See you next time.
And hey, Keith,
You-
thanks for taking all the action items by disappearing in the middle so that they didn't assign them to me when I was late. I really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Happy to do a solid. That reminds me though, I do have another action item on this blog post that we didn't talk about today for the
Yeah,
AI
you
Gateway
can
recommendation.
you can
Ping me
ping
if I
on
can
that.
help.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can ping
All
me.
right.
See you all later.
Talk to you later.
See you guys. Bye bye.